right, welcome back, everybody. And Friday is so sports centered, so we're gonna start with our weekly. We're gonna start with our weekly segment with exercise physiologist and sports scientist Marissa Gibson Bailey. And today we're going to be speaking about something called detraining. Good morning, Marissa.
Buenos días, Gary. Buenos días,
Buenos días.
Ken. No sabes que ustedes hablan español.
Un poquito.
Qué bien.
So today we're sort of speaking about something called detraining. That is not something I'm familiar with whatsoever. So tell us a little bit what detraining is.
Right. Detraining, it's a concept that implies when physical training is stopped or reduced. So there would be a reversal of the many favorable chronic changes that would have happened when you were training.
Okay.
Right? So, and that would happen to your organ systems. Now, for those physical education students who are looking on, you know what the organ systems are, which are basically 10, right? And all of these are affected with training. So there's a readjustment happening in reverse, right? So there's going to be a diminished physiologic stimuli happening there.
Is the training something that is done purposely, or is it something that is as a result of just not training?
Well, it could be done purposely because, for example, if you're an athlete that is going to retire, remember, in your training life, you would have been training, you would have been manipulating your physiological variables. Your heart would get bigger depending on what sport. Your system would just be different. You're not, I always say athletes are superhumans because they are not normal, right? That's how I interpret it.
Right.
And because you're not going to be training any longer, those physiological changes remain there. So you probably have to detrain, or you'll have to decondition to the point where you get back to normal living. Remember, you're not going to be training for competition to your highest level. You want to be a normal person, you know, and I say that in inverted commas, right? A normal person. So you want to be able to get back to just maybe doing physical activity or just doing training just to keep you healthy, right? So there must be that moving from that high performance to that normal way of living. I think that is important. Detraining could also happen if you on bed rest, which would bring us to the next point.
Right.
Bed rest is one where you're confined to the bed. You have no choice. If you're injured, then detraining or deconditioning will happen.
And is there anything that people can do, even if injured or so, to make that detraining process one that is not as harsh on the body?
Well, the only way that detraining could happen, obviously, if you're confined to the bed, and most times that happens if you're injured, seriously injured as an athlete, which would have significant deconditioning issues, right?
Right.
To avoid that, coaches have to engage in planning, programming, and periodizing, which is taking care of the athlete and actually planning a training program for you not to be able to have reduced oxygen consumption, reduced heart mass, right? These are just typical examples of what could happen if you get yourself involved, or if you experience the detraining concept. So it's very, very important. And I cannot advocate much for coaches to be very, very keen on periodizing, on programming, on planning. This is one key way in which you could avoid detraining.
Definitely. In this time of COVID-19, where so many things were put on hold or halted altogether, a number of athletes may have gone through this process of detraining. How do they bounce back from that?
Well, like we would have discussed the last time, and bouncing back is one thing. You have to know where you're at. You must know your current training status. So it's one thing to go through the period of not being able to train as you're accustomed to. But in order for you to move forward, you must assess where you're at. And this is where both the coach and the athlete, especially the coach or his support staff, need to come on board, assess where the athlete is at. Providing that you have your training program planned from before, this is where you now make the adjustment. So based on the results of your support team. Remember, we talk about the support team, and it's not just the physiotherapist, it's not just the strength and conditioning. Your support team, you're supposed to have your psychologist, your physiologist, your sport medicine practitioner. It's a whole team that you now have to look in different parts in a whole to know how to move forward. Remember, there are so many things that affect the performance of an athlete, and that is key. So that's how you know you would bounce back. How do you plan from where you are, right? So that you could be able to move on.
I know you spoke to some means by which detraining can happen, if somebody's bedridden or injured and stuff, but what is an extreme example of detraining?
The same bed rest. Confined to a bed is the worst thing. You would sometimes, that is psychologically going to throw off an athlete.
Right.
The first, while they're injured, they want to know, okay, when am I going to get back out to training? That is an anxiety. That's a psychological issue. So knowing that you're going to be on bed rest, it's going to take a toll on the athletes being confined to a bed. And we see that if you're sick, right? If you're sick and you're bedridden for a while, you start to lose muscle mass. And this brings us to the point of the training modalities or the biomotor abilities that are going to be reduced over a period of days when you don't train that specific ability.
Yeah, even from my own experience, just training in the gym, not to the level of athletes who do track and field and, like professional sports. But, I see a marked decline in my capacity of performance, So the question is, how soon after one, is not in training, do they observe a decline in capacities?
As little as 2 weeks, and possibly sooner, especially if you're a highly trained individual. So, for example, strength, that begins from 4 to 5 days.
Wow.
Endurance from 4 days. Speed from 3 days. So you'd hear that term of athlete eating, sleeping, their sports, right? It's that if you have dedicated to your life to become an elite athlete, it's depending on your training program, it's every day because of the goal that you have to achieve, right? And that is why detraining too is important after you retire. Remember, you've subjected your body, you've given your body to scientists to manipulate, to coaches to manipulate. After a while, that's going to take a toll, right? That if you do not, for example, long distance runner, the walls of their heart is thinner than a strength related athlete.
Really?
The walls are thicker, right? And this is, I like that you open your eyes, Carrie, because it's just how important the role of coaches are, and that they have to be accountable for the training program that they implement on athletes. You are manipulating the physiological variables of athletes. You must be accountable for that. You must plan properly for that. Because if you're taking my heart rate up and down and my lung capacity all over the place, I mean, you must be accountable for that. You must show a plan in how you manipulate and modulate my physiological variables as an athlete in order to get me to run, jump, and throw further, that kind of thing.
That's right. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us this morning, Marissa Gibson Bailey.
Thank you.
For, chatting with us about detraining. And I was chatting with Marissa Gibson Bailey, again, exercise physiologist and sports scientist. All right, thanks again. We'll chat with you next week.
Yes, Gary.
All right, take care. All right, and with that, we're going to take a short break and come back with much more, so stay with us.